Hello and welcome to Radical Engagements here at Varn Blog, and today we're talking about Max Reed, the Soy Right Ascendant, the Return of Gamergate, which is not a chicken jockey destruction of a theater, but apparently where the right is now. Many people may have noticed when Sam Cedar talked to a bunch of rightists, they were dressed like hipsters from 10 years ago. And we've also seen the news of 16 to 21-year-olds being 6 points pro-Republican compared to Zoomers who are over 24 who tend to favor the Democrats and the left, whatever that means. But, you know, in addition to the fact that millennials in 2005 were predicted to be a moderate to conservative generation, and younger millennials in 2014 were worried about boys becoming large members of the alt-right, this panic, while it does seem to be a little bit more severe than in times past, for reasons that probably have to do with lack of socialization, growing up post-COVID, watching Joe Biden suck, we do have to ask ourselves, what's with this hip, new right that looks a lot like the people that the right used to mock as soy boys 10 years ago? That's an interesting question. I don't have answers. But I do have articles. So let's get to it. The Soy Right Ascendant, The Return of Gamergate, Max Reed. Greetings from Max Reed HQ. Today's newsletter is an attempt to define and analyze the dominant strain of online activity for a second-term Trumpist, the Soy Right. And I noticed this weird stuff with like teenager aim memes from the White House page that were pretty alienating to me, but I'm sure someone finds funny, like the banana party in 2002. Nonetheless, let's continue. A reminder, as always, that every Max Read newsletter is the fruit of full-time jobs worth of hours reading, analyzing, discussing, thinking, staring into space, pacing nervously, etc. The 5,000 or so words I write every week are generously enabled by my paying subscribers who fund not only my life and snacks, but also allow me many free subscribers to access this week's dispatches. Thank them for me. It's Varn here. If you've been enjoying what I write, if you find it valuable, if you want to support independent journalism, criticism, and analysis, and shit posting, you might want to keep one post a week free so everyone can read it, considering paying to subscribe for the low price of roughly one beer a month. We have Benny Johnson tweet, "This photo reads the internet. Elon Musk and Kid Rock at UFC 309 looking like the biggest Gen X that's left out in the sun too long that I've seen." I do think we need to talk about Gen X's relationship here, but the generational politics is actually a little bit disturbing. But it is actually the two most conservative generations statistically right now are middle period Gen Xers and very young Zoomers. So what's that about? We're now 3 weeks into the second term of the Trump administration, and it seems clear that something has changed from the first go-round. The MAGA populist fraction of the Trumpist coalition has been relatively marginalized in favor of the Austrian accelerationist Silicon Valley right, the people just slightly downstream of the neo-reaction, and who are neoliberals in one country, drawing out the internationalism of neoliberalism for all the austerity and the public-private partnerships, but no competition for those public-private partnerships, mind you. They need to be played by insiders with bad hats. All right, the archetypal article about Trump voters and rural diners has been replaced with magazine stories about obnoxious arrivistees comparing Trump to Beyonce in the inauguration to Comic-Con. Gross. Even Trump himself seems oddly sidelined. His threats about tariffs and treasuries effectively ignored by both heads of state and the stock market. Not anymore. This is 95 days in when I'm recording this, or 96 days in when I'm recording this. It's very different than when this was written 3 weeks in. So they're not ignoring Trump anymore. In fact, Elon and co. are no longer being watched nearly as much and maybe are losing favor in certain circles anyway. His striking and creatives whose social postings left mostly unread, not true anymore, while Elon Musk attracts all resistance energy simply by tweeting laughs at some of the worst jokes on the planet. The end of the beneficiaries of the Trumpist upward distribution haven't changed much, but the effect of the second Trump administration is, so far, wholly different. Gone is the apocalyptic malevolence of American carnage supplanted by the unctuous corniness of Doge. Gone is a sense of lasting political realignment, succeeded by an inescapable minoritarian whine, which, it's weird, this does seem like a minoritarian government, even though it's the first time Trump won with the popular vote. Gone are Steve Bannon. Well, he shows back up regularly to comment wryly on the situation, seemingly loyal to Trump despite everything, but yet also very annoyed. The alt-right, they've been gone for a long time. I mean, Richard Spencer was part of the Racist for Biden League, and the forgotten man and woman Trump once celebrated in his first 2016 victory speech. In their place, Elon Musk and the soy right. The soy right. Soy, as a piece of internet slang, originated amongst more masculinist reactionaries in the 2010s as a dismissive synonym for fragile or feminine. Deriving from the high phytoestrogen content in soy and the alt-right folk belief that soy consumption feminizing effects on men. Because phytoestrogen totally acts like estrogen, except it doesn't. Anyway, a soy boy was any man who was physically weak, passive, thoughtful, genteel, or otherwise didn't conform to the speaker's gender standards. Although that out of itself was always variable, depending on which form of rightist you were talking to. Though still a somewhat gendered insult, soy these days suggests a less abstractly feminine weakness, a more specific message board archetype, grating, weepy sensitivity mixed with undignified overenthusiasm and self-satisfied courtiness. So, fanboys. Closer to the synonym for cringe or Reddit or Funko as adjectives than to cuck or pajama boy. You might soy out over Marvel movies or Zelda games or pose for photographs with YouTube thumbnail type expressions with fake open mouth surprise known as soy facing. AKA, everyone's a fanboy now, even when they're not boys or fans. Back to the piece. Soy still means weak, but with less emphasis on the physical and more on the digital. In essence, it's a particular way of being bad at posting online. Over-emotional, unhemp, sycophantic, stands of everything, sensitive, unoriginal, a rule follower, reliant on stale formulations and hackneyed jokes. Soy is how the online right, always the vanguard of Trumpism, has perceived liberals since the Hillary Clinton campaign, against which they imagine and define themselves as based, brave, authentic, unafraid, self-confident, and cool. Now, what I find interesting about this has just replaced latte liberals from the 90s. I mean, these stereotypes evolve, but they don't evolve much. The simplest definition of the soy right, a term that's been in circulation for at least a couple of years, but has picked up steam since the Trump election, is right-wingers who have adopted the sensitive, agreed victimhood pose in corny rhetorical and personal style that they spent in the last 10 years attributing to liberals as the scarlet rights of the dialectic of desire. Now, I want to actually point out to this is not a new phenomenon. Agreed victimhood goes all the way back to evangelical posturing. I mean, it's a long-standing of the right. But what makes this interesting is since everything is fandom now, and most of these people don't go to church, even with their trad casts and never been catechumens or even know probably what the Eucharist is. Nonetheless, what you see here is a very clear reversion to fandoms of grievance, and that's been a long time. But even with the styles and personality of the past, anyway, scarlet rights and dialectics of desire, they have a special diets that are afraid of seed oils. They wear skinny jeans and have meticulously groomed beards. They talk nonstop about masculinity, drive pickups, wear plaid, but don't change a tire to save their lives. I mean, they forget that the Ford F-350 is a luxury car at this point, even though it's not a car. While the right spent years mocking liberals for wanting safe spaces and echo chambers, for crying about identity politics being frail, fragile, and overly sensitive weaklings, they are slowly transforming into the perfect mirror of it all without the nagging concern for equity or any of the lib shit. The soy right is being oppressed, and they want you to know it. They're scared to take the subway. They're offended that you called them white or cis. They're upset that you think that they are cool, that they were cool in high school, and they want to call the manager because there's less boobies in video games. They're crybabies of the highest order. And while the right is in winning cultural and political victories nonstop lately, that's not enough. They also need you to like them. Why don't you like them? That's my recent flagellating of Zoomers on the internet, but nonetheless, I don't really believe it's their fault as a generation. But these people get on my nerves. And their liberal counterparts did too, by the way. I just didn't really think that it was a good way to characterize most of what the left was doing. It makes me think of the great post, or okay, but still's observation from last August. Quote, this kind of conservatism we're stuck with now, whiny, sobbing guys with major depression diagnosis who are still an asshole about everything. And probably under 22, if we're honest. An even more succinct way of putting it might be the phrase on the circa 2015 t-shirt updated for 2025. Kanye attitude with Drake feelings. Cringe, gross. All right. To me, the other key aspect of the soy right psychological profile beyond its desperate need for approval and respect is a childlike refusal of agency and responsibility, even while in power, which, we also saw from liberals. So I guess this is just a general posture of American society at this point. Oh my God, this depresses the shit out of me. A 20-something with access to the Treasury Department system is a kid whose racism shouldn't be disqualifying. The South African billionaire throwing Nazi salutes is an enthusiastic neuroatypical man who needs our sympathy. The vice president of the United States would never have attracted the attention of the Pope if it weren't for hysterical progressives, the real villains. Who he got in trouble with the Pope just before he died. That's fun. That tells you the day I'm recording this. Silicon Valley oligarchs were driven into Trump's arms by the perfidy of Democrats. No one in the soy right makes affirmative choices. They're small beings who need protection and care. Because umbrage and grievance is actually a way to get ahead in American social media landscapes, partly because of its relationship to education. This is me talking, but I do think we need to deal with that. But anyway, the instance of on one's own weakness is a contemptible way to live in the world, but the style of the soy right is as important, and in some ways even more depressing, than its animating resentments. If the online right of the first Trump administration was an unstable blend of Facebook credulity and Fortran nihilism, the soy right is an unbearable mix of Reddit corniness and Twitter self-satisfaction. We can look at some examples, renaming the government agency after a decade-old meme coin and making a website an AI-generated cartoon. That's the soy right. Doge with the Doge space dog with Department of Government Efficiency. I do feel like sometimes this new government messaging is like designed for 5-year-olds. Right. Describing identification of the 6 Joan employees in Wired magazine as doxing and complaining distressingly that it places a target on their backs. That's the soy right. Cremu, this is a tweet. This is right. Notice the public officials were chosen for doxing, not the ones engaged in corruption and graft, but it's good and young. These young men will have a target on their backs for the rest of their lives because they sought to serve their country. Dressing up as a character from Sicario to record a video about your coffee technique, soy right. This guy here who walking around with tactical firearms, but also wearing big nerd glasses. A gaming website editor turned priest hitting a Nazi salute and then a DreamWorks face, soy right. No better encapsulation of American hitting a Nazi salute than the DreamWorks face. This is a tweet by Jeremy Kapowitz. Smugly bragging that you're tripling down on transphobia while still nervously self-censoring the slur, soy right. We're tripling down. T-word, T-word, T-word. Censored. This sentiment voiced in this way, using this metaphor, is unbelievably soy right. IB, Indian Bronson. What's happening in America is roughly equivalent to the yearbook committee and the theater kids getting rocked by a football team in the chess club alliance. Soy facing next to the president while wearing crazy MAGA hats, definitionally soy right. The most prominent soy right elected politician isn't Trump himself, too strange, too original, too flamboyant, but J.D. Vance, a smug, weak skin suit who repeatedly threw his own kids under the bus in order to rescue a groiper's job as a means of sucking up to Elon Musk, and who also tweets bad jokes in a deeply soy MCU. So that just happened voice, J.D. Vance. Puppy Bowl just showed a Chihuahua German Shepherd mix, and I got questions. The return of Gamergate. That's this odd and an annoying mix of weepy fragility, obvious self-importance, and obscene corniness sound familiar. It should, because as a matter of tone, it's identical to, here imagine me talking over you as you attempt to finish the sentence, the emotional register of the 20th century European fascism, the psychotically annoying way the Gamergates tweeted in 2015. I have to imagine if you made it this far into the post, through all this absolutely hideous, overanalyzed internet culture stuff about soy and based and the video game Nazi priest, you are familiar with Gamergate. If not, in broad strokes, Gamergate was a campaign of targeted misogynist harassment against a number of game journalists and commentators, and eventually me and the website I worked at, spurred by a set of intricate and boring and extremely unimportant accusations of bias in game journalism. For those of us who were involved at the time, it generally remembered as a moment we were all realized something bad was coming. Although you should have realized it way before then, but nonetheless. Pascal Wagner or Wagner, I don't know if it's German or not, wrote in a piece called The Future of Culture Wars is Here, and it's Gamergate, quote, there are notes here, too, from the hymn book that predates the internet. Self-pity, self-martyrdom, an overwhelming sense of your own blamelessness, the certainty that someone else's victimhood is nothing more than a profitable pose. All culture wars strike the same chords. This is an old evangelical thing. Because all culture wars are at bottom the same thing, the desperate efforts of a privileged and an ever-pluralizing America to cite their nails, the precursors of what they thought was once their exclusive domain. Now, I actually think this also applies to a lot of liberals. This is Varn talking, but nonetheless, and still does. But the thing is, American culture produces the same kind of crap on most of its sides. We live in a society, after all. Blah, blah, blah. Capitalism makes you all soy-faced. Blah, blah, blah. We have in a Gamergate is a glimpse of how those skirmishes will unfold in the future, all the rhetoric, weaponry, and stagecraft of the internet comment section brought to bear on our culture. Not just at the fringes, but at the center. What we're seeing now is a rehearsal where the mechanism of a toxic and inhumane politics are being tested and improved. Tomorrow's Lee Atwater will work through the sock puppets on the IRC. That's a long time since I thought about IRC. Tomorrow's Sister Soldier will get shouted down with rape threats. Tomorrow's Tipper Gore will make an inexplicably popular YouTube video. Tomorrow's Willie Horton will be an image macro. Tomorrow's Borking a doxing. Borking was a reference to Robert Bork. Tomorrow's Moral Majority, a loose coalition of dozers and robo-petitioners with scat GFs, trolls of them working feverishly in service of the old idea that nothing should ever really change, including their stupid 4chan, which doesn't exist anymore as of the recording that I'm making right now. But you really don't need to draw on any elaborate comparisons or jump through any hoops to say the online presence of Trumpist in his second term is like Gamergate. It is straightforwardly is Gamergate, composed of many of the exact same people who were, just last week, complaining incessantly with Elon Musk's participation in a tone that I can only describe as Reddit Sephiroth about, I'm not kidding, woke game journalism. We have all kinds of tweets about game journalists, and I'm not going to read, but they're all here. A not incorrect answer to the question, what is the soy right, is Gamergate. 10 years later, plus a handful of movement conservative influencers, plus the vice president of the United States, plus the richest man alive. Does the soy right matter? Let's reaffirm here that we're mostly talking about an online phenomenon. And as these tariffs hit up, this online phenomenon is less and less important. But when we were talking about Doge in the first 3 weeks of the Trump administration, it made a lot of sense. A particular mode and tone of discourse has come to dominate political rhetoric on X, the Everything app, and among certain Republican politicians. Most Trump voters are not members of the soy right. I would venture to say that most of them are not members of any right at all. I would actually venture to agree with that, even though a lot of leftists and liberals would not be happy that I said it. That Trump didn't win because of his 30% base of MAGA people. He won because the other 54 or 51%, depending on how you counted, of voters who actually voted wanted better prices and thought that dealing with one senile doddering fool would probably, who was clearly older, would lead to maybe dealing with the other old doddering mass coming up. Actual policy is mostly in stuff like renaming the Gulf of Mexico or complaining that High Cream Jeffries uses the word fight, moronic high-profile trolling, and sniveling whining. For this reason, I hesitate to suggest that the soy right is important by any reasonable definition. I don't think it's particularly politically detrimental or advantageous to have your administration represented online by a bunch of Gus and cornballs and Lamriant freaks. And it seems clear that Musk is going to illegally gut the federal government, regardless of whether or not you think he is based or epic. At least for a while, anyway. That's Varn talking. But I do think the prominence of the soy right online is now an interesting reflection of the second term administration's priorities and compositions. It seems to me to be a natural consequence of Trump's decision to offload most of his policy and action to the tech industry, and in particular Elon Musk himself. As Matthew Ellis has observed, the classic sunglasses truck selfie PFP posters who once dominated Trumpist discourse on Facebook and Twitter aren't really the main right-wing characters on here anymore because they're too old. They're disappearing along with Steve Bannon and the rest of the MAGA populist from Trump's administrative media profile. And also a lot of the people who held Trump back. The tech billionaires don't seem to be able to do that. They don't seem to be able to critique Trump in any real way. In their place, there are statues and cyberpunks of the dumbest return posters and cryptomaniacs, and of course, the soy right. If the trucker selfie Twitter has a loose correspondence to the Bannonite rank of Trump, the soy right definitely represents the Muskite ring. And the Muskite ring, at least still now, is winning, although that's changing as these deportations really heat up and the executive orders really kick up and the tariffs make less and less sense. So the people who spend a lot of time ignoring Trump aren't ignoring him anymore. As I say this on April 21st, 2005, after two Supreme Courts and even a Wall Street Journal piece where a conservative had hinted that maybe one needed to impeach Trump to stop capital flight. We'll see how this all ends.